Okay, good. Well, welcome everyone to the October 27th, 2021 meeting of the Citizens Oversight Committee for the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. So I'm going to take a roll call right now. Kingston Cole,
Present.
Larry Minikis,
Here.
Stephen Keese. Stephen, you're on mute, but I see you. Okay, Lucy Dilworth,
Here.
Rebecca Suggs,
Here.
Pat Randolph,
Here.
Max Perry, hooray,
Here.
Carolyn Longstreet,
Here.
and I'm Larry Chu. So our whole committee is here, and I just want to see if any of you have anything that you'd like to adjust on the agenda tonight.
My only thought would be, Ann, were you successful in getting Bruce, or do we need to be flexible with where we plug him into the agenda?
I did get a hold of Bruce and he's unable to make it this evening.
Okay. All right. We'll just move on to the next item. Now is the time in our meeting where we open it up for public comment. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to address this committee on a matter that is not on the agenda tonight, but within our jurisdiction, please raise your hand.
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience member. And there's no public comment.
Okay, no public comment tonight. Next is our executive officers report.
Well, good evening, everybody. The first thing I wanted to chat about was the Loma Fire that we had a few weeks ago on one of our last red flag days that we had. And it is a location where there has been some strategic fuel break work going on to keep fires from being able to go from the Lucas Valley area to Sleepy Hollow, or vice versa from the Sleepy Hollow into Lucas Valley. And it's been several different land managers or land owners that have been performing the grazing that created that fuel break that's in there. Specifically where the fire was, it's on private property, and it's where the land management tactic that this rancher has taken, I think, has been very responsible. He starts off with goats early in the year, allows the grass to regrow, and then comes in behind and brings in cattle. But he's very responsible with the level of grazing that he does, and he ensures that there's 4 to 6 inches of grass left behind after he moves the cattle from one area to other, and that really does significantly decrease the number or the potential of that fire. And under red flag conditions, and I don't know if you saw the video that was on the IJ posted by the sheriff's office, and you can hear the wind blowing up there, and it held on a mid-slope road. And for those of us that have been fighting fire all their lives, for a grass fire to hold on a mid-slope road is virtually unheard of, especially during red flag conditions. And if you look back at the fire that burned in the 20s, it burned from Ignacio to Bolinas. It is likely there's a saddle right by where the Loma Fire was. And it's likely that old fire back in the 20s went through that saddle, and that's how it got into the Ross Valley. Based on old written reports in the newspaper, people first seeing it coming into the back of San Domenico, the back of Sleepy Hollow. So we think it was that saddle right there, which was literally 500 yards from where this fire was before. So it was a big success story for me for on a couple areas. I think it's really good land management. That rancher is actually seeing a dramatic decrease in the non-natives. The properties that abut his property, he's seen purple star thistle and yellow star thistle encroaching in those properties. But his property, he's been able to manage those non-natives. So, and then we have the results of the fire. Moving on with our, I'm sure you all saw that our annual report has been published, and we will be, right now it's simply posted on our website, but we are going to be printing hard copies for our member agencies to have. And then we are going to be reaching out through social media and through other means, and reaching out to a lot of our stakeholders as well to help share, whether it's our member agencies, League of Women Voters, COST, or any other civic groups like that. We're going to be asking to help share that. The website, I'm very pleased with the website. But I do want to make a couple caveats. You'll notice there's a banner at the top that says, please excuse to construction, basically. And one of the biggest places that we need to do some work is our archives of our meetings. All the meetings are in there, but it's not as intuitive to find the meetings as I would like. If you look at the board of directors, that's where I would have been able to spend the most of my time to organize the board of director agenda packets, minutes, and videos. That's how the rest of them will look at. But for each meeting, it takes me 15 to 20 minutes of time to get all that built in the back ends for it to show up on the website. So I'm finding times where I could chip away at that. Also notice that we have the wrong budget posted on the about the MWPA guiding documents. So we will obviously get the right budget listed on there. But we got some really good feedback online recently, and I'm really pleased with it. And we're trying to make our projects just as easy to find and visible on that website in multiple ways that you can find our projects in that website. Speaking of our projects, and our web team and Panorama actually had a recent meeting on developing the framework to create the next work plan and to create far more efficiencies than we had in this last work plan development, so that the data that's entered on day one of development of the work plan won't have to be entered again, and it will live in the right spot all the way until the conclusion of all the work. Quite frankly, I think if I put our member agencies through what I put them through last time, I may get hung. So, we're definitely going to have to make that better, but we are. And we have some great models that Panorama has been involved with to follow. And if Ann wants to add anything to that, please do, Ann.
Sure. That was a great summary, though. Yeah, the idea here is to make the process much easier, start earlier in the year. We're already kicking off that process of designing that portal for member agencies to enter their information, their project descriptions, their maps, etc. And it'll be a much easier process this time around with a bit more time for additional collaboration and consideration.
Great, thank you. Objectives and metrics. We're also working hard on that. We have a task force that's working on that with members from the operations committee, the advisory technical committee, because they are the people that really know the projects, right? And they're the ones that really should be looking at the objectives and metrics. And Charlotte Jourdain, who is very talented in that type of work, has been guiding that process. We've got 2 meetings done so far, and we're probably going to have, I thought we were going to get it done in 4, but I don't think we're going to get it done in 4 because it's turning out to be a much more in-depth project than we thought. But we're pounding away at those, and they will be integrated into the website under our goals so that you can easily track in a dashboard format how we're doing with our metrics. I think most of you saw that we will be opening up the recruitment for the 3 positions that end for this year: Central Marin, West Marin, and Civic Group. And we are using, we took the base form that we had last year, and thank you, Mr. Keese, for all the work that you did last year in making that. And we re-entered it into the web page format that we have now. And so it'll be the same type of easy online process. Click a download button so you can load up your resume, just like you guys did last time. And we'll open up the recruitment November 1st, close on November 30th. We will be using social media again and our partners to help advertise. I ask you guys to help advertise for that. And we will also be putting an ad in the IGA and the Point Reyes Light, since the West Marin position is going to be one of those positions in there. Our work plan, speaking of work plan stuff and how hard it is to navigate our 1,051 pages, I think it is, work plan. We had Maria Weinberg at Southern Marin Fire took an entire day and broke that package out into 17 work plans. So it's 1 per member agency. Each of those packets has the entire JPA portion of the work plan and then the portion of the work plan that is specific to each member agency. So at the end of this meeting, I will send you all the link to the Google folder that has each one of those. And so if you want to look up a project and you know it was a San Anselmo project, you'll be able to pull up the San Anselmo book and dig into that instead of going through 1,000 pages. And then the thing I wanted to close out with is our work with Stanford, and the paper that they're writing on the formation of the MWPA is really hit its stride. We've seen a close to final draft. It looks phenomenal. Looking forward to that being able to be published. But it also parlayed into another relationship that we're at Stanford, and they have a group that's looking at watershed resiliency. And we have already started as the MWPA meeting with the North Bay Watershed Association, because good watershed resiliency is good wildfire prevention as well. They go hand in hand. And so they're really interested in the partnership that we're looking to create with the North Bay Watershed Association, and they're looking in that as well. And with that, I'll take questions.
Thank you, Mark and Ann. I see Larry has his hand up, and then Lucy, if you have questions for Mark or Ann, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to make a suggestion because Bruce is unable to make it. And under your report, Mark, I wonder if you, I see Maria Schmidt is in the audience. If you could bring her in and introduce her to us as part of your report, since we don't really have it agendized. I think it's an opportunity for the COC to meet her.
We actually introduced both of them at the last one.
Oh,
Where were you?
well, in that case.
but actually,
Meetings.
but Larry, you just reminded me of something I meant to bring up, and that is the prescribed fire panel that we're partnering with ESP to host on November 16th. Anne Maria is one of the key designers for that right now. She's doing a phenomenal job. I just saw the presentation that's going to guide that panel discussion, and it looks awesome. So when I think the link is finalized, but I'll be sending that link to all of the board, all of the COC, all of the ops, and all of the advisory technical committee. I think it's going to be a very interesting webinar.
Yeah, very much so. I was going to bring it up. So thank you, Mark.
Okay, Lucy and then Carolyn.
Quick question about the North Bay Watershed Association. Is this all the water districts in like all the Bay Area counties? Who is this group?
It's an interesting group. It's watershed, whether it's land managers for the own watershed, water purveyors, so people who manage the actual infrastructure for water delivery, and actually sanitary as well.
Oh.
We're not looking at the sanitary part with our partnership, but we're looking at two aspects of it. We're looking at pre-fire work that goes along with good watershed management, and then also how to avoid damage to the infrastructure, or what the damage has caused to the infrastructure by wildfire, whether it's the pipes in the ground that's been causing benzene issues for some of the areas that have been burned. And then just think about the marine municipal water. 70% of the water is from our reservoirs. And if we have a devastating fire that creates a ton of runoff or sediment flow into those reservoirs, think about the water supply for marine. So those are really the things that we're looking at.
And this is a private organization where it's just a sort of members only for public agencies, or you said there are some water purveyors. Who are they?
It's a public entity, and they follow the Brown Act with all their meetings and such. So North Bay Watershed Association, you should be able to, they have a website.
Okay.
North Bay Watershed?
Association.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I haven't heard of them either.
Mhm.
Okay,
Go ahead, Carolyn, you can continue. And,
Okay,
Stephen.
thanks. I think I'm not muted, so I'm interested to hear more about the rancher and his goats, followed by cattle, and the 6 inches of remaining. Do we know, is he following a guideline? Is there a study that he's relying on? What do we know about how he came up with this method, and Can we find out more? Because it might be really, really useful throughout the county.
I agree, Carolyn. And the answer is yes, he has tremendous amount of research in, leading to how he's managing the land. What specific research is, I can't speak to, and it is all private land, and the rancher is paying for all himself. He's not receiving any public funds for these. We wanted to do a site visit. However, there's sensitivity to it being private property and how many people come onto the private property. However, we are going to set up a video where and make it as realistic as possible being on the site. And the rancher has agreed to be, or the ranch manager has agreed to be a part of that conversation. Because when I stood on that fire road with him a week after the fire and heard him talk about how he manages the land, I was truly impressed. And so I asked him right there, can we get this? You can explain it so much better, what you're doing on your land, so much better than I can. We would love to hear it from you.
I mean, do you think he'd be open to talking with us and telling us about his research? It sounds like he's kind of a private sort of person.
He is open to sharing the story. How in depth in person is the question mark. I'll just say that he's a high exposure landowner.
Okay.
Celebrity,
Well,
like celebrity and
I'm
landowner.
hoping to find out. I'd love to find out more. Maybe talk to the guy. It would be fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, Stephen, then Kingston, then Rebecca.
I've been going to the North Bay Watershed Association meetings for several years with Pamela. It's it's sort of almost a voluntary group, but each agency that has something to do with water, like sanitary agencies or water districts or others, send members to it. But they really don't have much in the way of money. But they do have a really sharp guy from Sonoma who is a staff director. And the meetings are, I think, the first Friday of the month for a couple of hours. And I've always been impressed by their speakers and the discussions. And they go around to let everybody know what's going on in their districts. So I recommend it if people have time. It's a very informative meeting every time.
Okay, Kingston.
Yeah, I'd like to know what the status is on the discussions between ESP and the MWP on the best practices, where we are, where the status of it. And secondly, if you're getting towards the end, is there going to be some sort of formal document? How is it going to end? I mean, what's it going to look like? Okay.
Thank you, Kingston. My apologies for not including that. We had a very, I felt, productive meeting on Monday, Anne, with some of the key players with ESP, where it was Anne, myself, and Sequoia and Panorama, going page by page, almost line by line, with the recommended changes from our legal staff and our environmental staff. And we wanted to do it together rather than just hand a document off, because there's so much more that when you can describe the thought behind it rather than just seeing the changes. So ESP has it now and putting their eyes on it in their review. The next step will be through the Advisory Technical Committee and Operations Committee, and there's a possibility that both those bodies will review it at the same time rather than have two subsequent meetings. And then eventually to the exec committee and board of directors, with potentially adopting it as a formal document within the MWPA.
Any idea of the time? How long is this going to take? I mean, it seems like it's been going on for quite a while. So what can you expect?
Well, we expect it to be done prior to the implementation of the next work plan. So prior to July 1.
So sometime in the next 8 or 9 months.
Potentially. We're not rushing it. We're just making sure that we give it the.
I can tell that.
Yeah, we're just making sure. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, to be quite honest with you, and I don't want it to sound like a cliche excuse, but time was taken away from reviewing the document because Ann and the environmental team has been working on the 21-22 work plan and the compliance with that. So it's pulled resources away from the review.
All right. Thank you.
Right, Rebecca?
If I can add to that, we've been referring to the ESP document in its draft form as we go and as we design our project design and implementation features as we go. So those features and those suggestions and that guidance has already been incorporated into a lot of what we're already doing.
But again, is there going to be a formal agreement between the parties? All right. And if so, yeah, is it 8 months out? I guess. I mean, is it going to be a handshake and incorporation of all the best practices everybody agrees upon, or are you going to actually have a formal document between ESP, all right, and the MWPA?
It'll be a document that's approved and adopted by the board of directors.
Okay. All right.
All right, Rebecca and Larry, you had another question after that. Rebecca, you're on mute.
I'm never on mute. Mark, the annual report is out. Quit laughing. What's the relationship between the annual report and our report? Should there be one, timing
I don't think there
wise?
should. I think the annual report from the COC needs to be this annual report from the COC.
So for this year, for sure, whenever we can get it ready. But when we're thinking about process for next year, should there be a relationship? And it sounds like maybe not.
I think it's better to keep it separate. It's your. I feel the report that you guys produce should be your guys' report. I'm happy to provide administrative support, such as design and printing and that type of the technical expertise. But I think it would be better if the development of the content is separate.
Independent.
Independent that's a better way to put it.
Got it. Thanks.
Lucy, on this topic or a new one?
This topic. So Mark, just when you did the annual report, was there a template and then so there's going to be an introduction section, and then who wrote the introduction section? How was that all handled in terms of the specific content that was put in?
Pam Kuhn, our communications specialist that we've have on contract, created a framework and created many of the main categories that we spoke on, and with collaboration with mostly Ann and I, we would get together and say, all right, these are the types of, this is what we are looking at for organization. And then Pam would build the framework and then reach out to, and I'll use Elisa Schiffman from our finance manager. She would build the framework and say, hey, this is what it can look like. Give me the information. And then she would doctor up the information to make it look pretty. And then Elisa would come in, and both Elisa and I would come in and review it. Yeah, that's accurate. No, let's change this. And but most of the framework was built by Pam, and then we would come in and
fill in the content. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks.
Larry?
Yeah, I wanted to reinforce what Ann was saying, which is when you open the work plans, and Mark has brought this up too, and you read through the documentation, you can see that the best practices, as Ann was saying, that are being suggested are already being incorporated. A number of them are already incorporated in there. And I can't speak for ESP directly on this document, but I can say that the steering committee is motivated to move it along. So we will move as quickly as we can at our end on it. We won't be sitting on it. Let me just be really clear there. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Mark, I just had a question for you regarding the either existing board members who's termed out or terms will end this year. Did they ever the board ever codify a specific process for that? For example, in Larkspur, they will take whoever is incumbent and has an interest in continuing and interview them first to determine whether they need to go to the public or not, because otherwise you'd be wasting the public's time if they're satisfied with who's already there.
You mean board members or COC members?
Did the board members ever codify the selection of COC members because it's their appointment?
The recommendation was just to do the full recruitment.
Yeah, I know that's how we discussed it. So that's how, I mean, they're basically leaving it up to us, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
To
thank you.
apply.
All right. I'll open it up to members of the public. To
Actually,
any
Larry,
members-
I did forget one thing, if you don't mind, and that is all the rain that we just got. And obviously has put a significant hit to our fire season. And I hate being a fearmonger. However, there was a fire on Angel Island Monday. They just dispatched another fire on Angel Island as this meeting started. So we may have gotten historic amounts of rain. The fuels on the ground could only absorb it so quickly. And it after you get an inch or two, the rest of that rain is bonus rain. It's not really absorbing into the fuels. The live fuels are not necessarily in a position to absorb it right now. So, and then the light fuels, they get to their saturation point, and as soon as the rain stops, they start expiring that water out. So unless we continue to have healthy rain at a healthy interval, we could get back into a situation where we have a fire threat again. And then historically, the fire season following a drought busting rain season is usually one of our most catastrophic seasons. And that's because the heavy fuels, it takes years for them to get that moisture back that they lost over years of drought. And having two subsequent droughts separated by a single rain year has put the heavy fuels in catastrophically low conditions that it's going to take a couple years of rain to get them to where they're not as available to burn as they have been.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, Stephen?
Yeah, I was just saying, most of us, my neighbors and I have been talking about the reservoirs and how many inches fell in that period in there, here or on Mount Tam and elsewhere. But I think, Mark, what you just mentioned is something that should be publicized. It is not just drinking water and water supply through MMWD and North Marin Water District, but also the wildfire potential is something that we need to keep in mind also.
And I've been trying to share it as much as I can, and we will, and we're going to add that to our public information campaign through Fire Safe Marin.
Rebecca?
And can I say, tell Mike McGuire, because he puts himself with lots of words out there all the time. And he's saying, yeah, we've, killed the fire for this year. Maybe, but don't quit thinking about fire. So tell him.
Go get Mike.
I'll give him a call.
Make him your best bud.
It's hard to get in a word in edgewise when you're talking to him.
Yeah, but
I can imagine.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to members of the public and see if they have any questions or need clarification on any of the reports given by staff.
Looking for any raised hands from our audience member. And there's no public comment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is approval of the consent calendar. The only thing on our consent calendar is the minutes from the last meeting. Would any member of the committee like to pull that for correction or additional discussion?
Larry, if I may, a recommended change on item 7 in the minutes, where Larry Minikis is talking about the fire on his hill. Maybe it might be better for context if we clarify that to the fire on San Rafael Hill, so people who are reading the minutes understand exactly where it's at, give it a little better context.
Okay.
since it's also Kingstonville too.
Yeah, I was just saying Larry and Kingston's Hill.
Uh-huh.
Come
That's,
on.
that's what I suggest. That's exactly what I
Exactly.
Well, let's just do that. It'll be perfect. No?
Okay, would any members of the public like to pull the agenda for additional discussions or questions?
Looking for any raised hands,
Not agenda, last time's minutes.
and there's no public comment.
Okay, thank you. We'll take a motion to approve the minutes from last time as amended. I see Kingston with a hand
Done.
and Stephen second.
Good.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Looks unanimous.
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Right, the next item on our agenda was going to be a presentation by Board President Bruce Goines. He is not able to attend tonight, so we're just going to move on to our committee reports. The first thing we have are monitoring assignments. Is there any committee member of specific assignments or whoever their designated representative or chair like to bring anything up for discussion tonight? Okay. Seeing none, any members of the public wish to address anybody on a monitoring assignment?
Looking for any raised hands from our audience member. And there's no public comment.
Okay. Next, item 8B, we have a discussion about standing COC agenda items on the Executive Finance and Operations Committees. Mark had given us a report that was attached to the packet, and hopefully you've all had a chance to read that, but I will let you make that presentation, Mark.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I want to thank Lucy for the conversation and the work that she and I put our heads together. And I know that she reached out to other members within the COC. And I think this is a great way to put the COC in a position of being more proactive rather than totally reactive. And I think it can be done in a way that makes it palatable for people that might be concerned that we have a proactive COC, to put it bluntly, to be honest with you. And personally, I welcome it. And I think it falls in line well. Lucy and I had some conversations. What part of the executive committee, finance committee, or the operations committee makes sense for that place to plug in? And it felt like, well, it's a citizens oversight committee. So perhaps committee reports make sense for it to go in. And it's important to point out that Larry and I had a conversation about this morning, and what's not in the staff report is I think it's important that the groups that have the monitoring assignments for the Executive Finance and Operations Committee identify which of those members of the COC will be that member that will be speaking for that portion of the agenda item on those. And a reminder that if it's a new topic that's on that agenda, then it's inquisitory in nature only. And you may or may not get a response from the staff or the committee because we may not have the information to provide it. We want to make sure that we give you a complete and honest answer. If it's in an opinion or a position of the COC, then it needs to be something that's already been deliberated by the COC, and then that member being authorized by the COC to speak on behalf of the COC, since your bylaws state that members can only speak on behalf of the COC when authorized. And I ended up putting a 12-month, well, let me put it this way. We have our draft executive committee meeting agenda written now. The COC is written as an item for the under committee reports, with an introductory staff report very similar to the one that you guys received today, to present to introduce it to the executive committee. And I put a 12-month trial as the recommendation for the length of trial. I wanted to get your guys' feedback on that recommendation. And then based on our conversation with Larry, I put Larry and I as co-authors of the staff report to present to the executive committee on that first meeting.
Okay. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Lucy.
So I just had a question. The last paragraph says, for items that the COC has previously deliberated and has come to an opinion, opinion they wish to share with the committees, they should draft a staff report for inclusion of the agenda item and present the staff report to the appropriate committee. Just a mechanical question. So COC determines that one of the work plans is questionable or what blah blah.
Mhm.
You would then take those questions and concerns and write a staff report and present them. How would that work?
I think it's more a collaboration that
Okay.
if you give me some bullet points, then I can put it into a staff report.
Okay. All right.
But I would suggest that it's presented to that committee by the COC rather than the executive officer.
Present that staff report. So, okay, so have it up there and open to questions and then respond with questions, etc.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Rebecca?
And does that collaboration happen in a COC full meeting? Or does it happen because Lucy calls you and says, do it this way?
It would have to be based on the deliberation of a full meeting, and then whoever, using the example of Lucy, it would be, yes, Lucy worked with Mark to create that staff report.
Carolyn?
You're muted, Carolyn.
Carolyn, you're on mute.
And that's the trouble with muting myself, because I always forget. So I take it the committee would designate somebody to present a report on whatever the issue was to whichever committee. You know, what might be interesting is to toss around examples of things that we might take action on and present to one of the committees. Can someone think of a situation where we would have, if this had been in place, we would have done it this year or going forward? Let's just try to visualize or imagine how this will go. I think it would also, my other remark is it'll take up a fair amount of our meetings to discuss things to possibly present and come to consensus, etc.
I think if I can think of an example early on, we had some questions, not questions, but the finance committee was discussing some policy related stuff. I mean, if the COC would have thought that there was something that they wanted to express their opinion on, we would have that discussion and come to a consensus on what it is we'd want to present. And, amongst the finance committee, they can either decide on their own or within this committee to pre-designate whoever the spokesperson would be. Yeah, Rebecca?
Larry, are you thinking if, say, for example, the work plan subcommittee finds a work plan that looks a little fishy, we would bring that to finance committee, or we would bring that to full COC?
You'd have to bring that to the COC in order to determine what, we authorize as the message to go up to whichever body you want to address.
And if that fishiness were, sorry, another word just doesn't come up. If that fishiness appears to be financial, but it was the work plan group that brought it up, that's not a problem, right? We could still just bring it up to the full COC.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we would work it out amongst ourselves in terms of, which group would be best, to address or make that presentation.
And in that case, then it might be, even though the work plan group found it, it might be somebody on the finance subcommittee to bring it up for the whole COC because it's a finance question.
I think it
Maybe.
would depend also on, who being which group has the, let's just say, more knowledge or can speak to the issue.
Yep.
With greater depth, one or the other. yeah, there'd be no, I don't think anything's set in stone. We would just have to determine amongst ourselves, just so that, we don't go in there as a group and then we don't know who's going to speak. And certainly when you're on video, you can't be shooting a glance at the other person, and that's kind of the signal that, you're talking like you would in a real meeting.
Got it.
Yes, Carolyn.
I noticed that the board is not one of the, entities that we would be presenting to. That might make some sense, but on the other hand, something could come up that we do want to present, but I suppose nothing would keep us from doing so if the situation arose.
Yeah,
But maybe they should be included. I don't know if there was any discussion of that.
Well, actually, it was a discussion at the COC of which 3 committees at either the last meeting or 2 meetings ago that this was a discussion point.
I say.
I just saw a hand go up and go down. Oh, Pat, yeah, I couldn't tell. I was glancing.
So just for clarification, if let's say Lucy is the designated person to go to the executive committee meeting and the COC has not met so that we don't have a position, but Lucy sees something on the agenda that raises some concern from her, she can simply ask questions.
Correct.
She can say, do I understand this correctly? Or, have you considered, or that sort of thing. But then at a subsequent meeting, after she has brought the issue back to the full COC and we have come to a position, then she could at that meeting. Is that correct understanding?
Exactly.
Sounds good.
Yeah, Larry.
You're
Oh,
muted.
You're mute.
You were waiting for that, Carolyn, weren't you?
I was.
I try not to do that, which would leads me to because we work so closely, all of us, if we don't have something we're going to bring to one of these committees, would we necessarily have to be agendized for that upcoming meeting? Because we are sort of communicating with you, Mark. You or would know ahead of time whether we have discussed something that we want to put on the agenda. That's my point.
I would recommend keeping it on there because you never know what might pop up during a meeting. And that gives you that opportunity to be inquisitory. And I see Lucy nodding her head, and I think Lucy was also probably going to say there might be more times than not when it gets to that agenda item, you might just say nothing to report.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pat.
Yeah, just one more clarification. So in all likelihood, we would have a kind of standing person that, Rebecca goes to finance, or Larry goes to finance committee meetings. Lucy goes to executive committee. Rebecca goes to operations, something to that effect. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah,
this
you
would
can decide that amongst your own group.
That's what I was saying. So this wouldn't really complicate things if, for example, I'm in the meeting and I want to make a comment, but I'm not making it as that person. It doesn't preclude me from saying that something that I want to say, for example.
Absolutely not. During public comment, you're free to speak during public
You're free
comment.
to, yeah. Okay, I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things staff asked for was direction on how long the trial will be. Is everyone okay with the 12 months?
Yes, sure.
Okay, got a lot of nods and some positive affirmation. Okay. Mark, did you need anything else?
No, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. At this point, I'll open it up to the public and see if they have any questions or comments for staff of the committee.
Max has his hand raised.
Oh, Max has, oh, I see Max now. Go ahead, Max.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. I was just going to ask when the year would begin, just to be clear on that, but I think that sounds good.
The first trial is November, or the first meeting that'll be appear as an agenda item is November 4th.
Great. So it'd be until November 2022.
Sounds good.
Great. Thanks.
Okay, once again, I'll open it up to members of the public who would like to comment or ask questions on this item.
Looking for any raised hands from our audience member. And there's no public comment.
Okay, thank you. All right, our last item for committee reports is on the different ad hoc subcommittees of the Finance Committee. Let's see, I'm just going to say that on the finance side, we have not met, so we're still waiting for financial reports and numbers to be made available to us, but I'll ask Kingston or Stephen if they have any questions or comments they'd like to make.
And if I may offer, I've asked for an ETA for audit and I haven't gotten an ETA on audit.
Okay. Yeah, Lucy?
Just a technical question. How come this comes in under the finance subcommittee? Aren't they equally, each one of these subcommittees, independent subcommittees? Just
Yeah,
a question.
They were, but I think we never resolved that.
Okay.
That question kind of came up 2 or 3 meetings ago, whether they were separate committees or whether they would be under finance. I always envision them as being separate committees.
How about I change the agenda title to audit related ad hoc subcommittees?
Yeah,
Mhm,
sounds good.
that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just gonna open it up, rather than call out each one. Do any of the other 3 subcommittees have anything they want or need to report on? Yeah, Kingston. Oh, Kingston, you're on mute.
I'm glad it's
I just did a Larry, excuse me. I'm sorry.
Oh my God.
We've been focusing on the website, and many of the questions that we have are recommendations. We've got a page and a half of them. We will submit to Mart, but I did want to mention, I have a close friend of mine and who's also an expert in this area. And I went and asked him to take a look at the website. And he came back with some comments, but just the most important one is it's basically a sentence. And he said that, speaking of the guy that started this, Kai Van Momeni of Polygon Media of San Rafael created the website. It's a product of a very talented web designer and reflects the agency's clear, well-organized, task-oriented thinking. It's a one-stop shop for residents. And that's a compliment coming from somebody who's just as good as this guy. And he checked them out. I mean, we have other quotes from the guy. We've got a list of things, most of which each member of the subcommittee might want to discuss right now. My concern was I couldn't find the annual budget, which you've just dealt with, and just to make sure that you're working on a project by project basis, the finite timelines, how it's being done, how much money is being spent, et cetera. I mean, for instance, you've got San Rafael Hill in there as ongoing, and it's as far as I can tell, everything's always ongoing because you have to keep going. Yeah, but it's one of the projects that's just about finished, I would think. So
yeah, good point.
Having said that, I will turn it over to the other committee members just for any comments. Lucy, Larry, all right.
So I had a question about where it talks about collaboration, and then it says fire adapted Marin. You click on that and it takes you straight to a list of the committees that exist in the agency. And I'm not sure that that's exactly what you meant by fire adapted.
Good catch. I'll work on it.
Okay.
I just did it while you're talking, and yeah, that is not where that link's supposed to go.
Okay, and then another
It's in the list.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
And then, no, actually, that one wasn't in the list, but.
No, I know. No.
The next one was just a question in under that same category of collaboration. You have request for proposals, which is I just struck me as a kind of an odd place for it. It's not that it's 100% inappropriate, but isn't there some other place that it might fit?
It was an afterthought that came
Uh-huh.
late in the game, and I want to find a better home for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Larry and Stephen are also committee members.
Yeah, I think you have my comments already, Kingston. I think the most important one, Mark, is easier access to alerts and evacuations, because someone's going to look for that when there's an emergency, when they're feeling stress, and if they have to sort of dig through it, it'd be much easier if there's a way for them to just like, bam, go to the site and bam, there, I can find it right there. That was about the most major thing, but otherwise it's wonderful. It's what more than expected, frankly, really, knowing your time constraints and your staffing constraints and all that. I very impressed, very impressed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, Kingston has all of my comments. I think I sent the first draft of them to you, Mark, and the website is impressive. It's well done.
Thank you. I'm pleased.
Yep.
As you should be.
Yeah, as our subcommittee is.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, Lucy has something.
So another matter that came up in the transparency subcommittee was to do, Mark, and I'm so sorry this is coming up again because I'm sure there's it's something that we've had a problem with in terms of our research, which is the Master Gardener, the UCCE Master Gardener authorization of the work plan. And when I went back to look at the video of the February presentation to the Operations Committee, Bill Tyler was referring to a proposal that there was a PowerPoint presentation from the UCC director, but he was also referring to a proposal. He mentioned that the proposal would be included in the minutes, and so it was never fully surfaced in the meeting as to what they were proposing beyond general terms of scaling up projects and then it happened to be that they were not included in the minutes, just an oversight, no doubt.
I think it was in the old website, and that's one of our transitional growing pains. I don't think it moved from the old website to the new website. And if I will double check that and add it if that's the case.
Okay, well, but just in terms of trying to think it through in a practical way, something like that comes up and it gets published in a work plan for the first time for the public to see as one item out of 1,000 pages. And so given that, I mean, and it's, I guess it was presented as a core program. Is that how it would have come out?
JPA-wide core proposal.
Okay, because it just seems that no member of the public is going to see it specifically. And then it was proposed, it was then approved as a job, one of the job lots. The actual conversation about it took place, well, the presentation took place. There was no discussion about it, I think because it was going to be referred to an ad hoc work committee, and they no doubt discussed it, but that was outside of the public's view. So then the COC can take it up in, on behalf of the public, but which we're now looking at. But it's, once again, it highlights the need for a present person at that time to say, I'm not quite sure I understand what, can you explain this a bit more or something?
And if I may do a quick screen share, I just, I still can see the back end of our old website.
Uh-huh.
And so here's where the presentation for firescaping was, and then click here for proposal.
Ah.
Oh,
So I will work to transfer that back into the new website, but it was present on our old website.
Okay, good. All right. So it's just using this as an example of something that I think the COC might just want to discuss amongst itself, and as to whether this is a project that might fall into a gray area that we would have some concerns about or not. But this is an example where we missed the opportunity to bring it up because none of us quite knew how to handle the whole process. But then we're going to be writing a report, and I'm assuming that the 21-22 approved projects would still fall into the report that we're going to be writing it this year. It's more than just the last year's project. Am I wrong?
No, your current report that you're working on now should only be the 2021,
Okay, so
2020, 2021.
Yeah, year.
year.
okay, so if we have any
Work-
questions about this item because it falls in a 21-22
That would be
program.
in the next report.
Okay, all right, thank you. Could we still talk about it?
Not in the report, no.
No, not in the report, but amongst, at a meeting.
Of course,
as
yeah.
a topic that we might have questions about. Okay, good. All right, thank you.
Okay,
So-
we had a kind of a question that was posed to staff the last time where COC was asked if it was appropriate for MWPA expenditures to occur on public lands owned by other agencies such as National Park Service, GGNRA, state parks, or MMWD. And we did a little bit of research on that, and I'm just going to let Mark sum it up for the group.
Absolutely. We did, I would say quite a bit of research actually. And then it was, once we opened that door also, the other side of that question came up, and that was, well, what about spending that money on private lands? Is it appropriate to spend the money on private lands, privately owned lands? And so that question came up. And so how we researched it is we looked at the language, and the key phrasing in the language that was important was for fire prevention activities for the taxing entity's jurisdiction. And so I'm going to use, since county fire is my background, my home, I'm going to use county fire as an example. County fire's jurisdiction is defined by CSA 31. Anything that's within CSA 31 is Marin County Fire Department's jurisdiction. The vast majority of Marin Municipal Water District's lands are within CSA 31. So if you look at that in that context, then it's appropriate for MWPA funds, Measure C funds, to be spent on those public lands and concurrently within the private lands. And just to do due diligence, we reached out to Jason Weber, who is obviously one of the key architects of Measure C. And he's like, well, Mark, absolutely, we wanted it to be on private and public lands because the whole premise of the MWPA is fire knows no jurisdictional boundaries. And if our projects have these critical holes in where they're at, that's exactly where the fire may find them to get through. And then the second piece of due diligence we did was talking to Stephen Robb, the primary architect of the Measure C ordinance language, and he concurred it was both for public and private lands.
Okay, thank you. I see Rebecca's hand up. Any questions on this item before we move on? Okay, thank you for all the work you did on this.
Thank you.
Right. Rebecca?
So mine was going to be a report about our subcommittee. Is that appropriate? Am I on the right track here?
Yes.
So the work plans subcommittee met, and we're working on our review of the 2020 work plans. So we have people assigned, and we've agreed that we will complete those reviews this month in November, assuming that finance is going to have finance stuff in November, but of course we don't know that. So, but we're going to be working on finishing up in November. If it turns out that finance is going to be another month or so, that could change our thought, but maybe not. Anyway, forget that part. We're going to finish in November. And we are thinking perhaps there needs to be a whole group meeting to discuss what this report's going to look like, because we need to know what format the format group wants it in. So are you going to want us to do paragraph writing or some kind of chart? Or yes, Lucy?
So this is related to my question to Mark. So we did the report committee, the annual report committee met, and we got as far as getting a budget from Mark, an approximate budget, sort of outlining the categories of things that we would want in the report, such as introduction. Then we would have a couple of examples of things that we think are exceptionally good projects, maybe even a couple of examples of things that we had questions about. And then we can either explain that they were resolved or however those projects get treated. Then there would be a category, well, then there would be the financial report. And then, so we sort of laid out, then there would be a transparency section if we were going to address overall transparency issues, probably to commend the agency. And then those would be the sort of categories that we would want to fill in. And then we might say to the work plan committee, could you come up with a couple of examples and write about them? And we'd say not more than a paragraph of projects that you think were, exceptionally well organized and thought out, and so we could incorporate them as clumps. But we would just, my question to Mark was, how much do we write? How much do the staff write? This will all have to be worked out. I don't think we really, but certainly content-wise, the work plan committee should be the ones that come up with the examples of things that we think we want to highlight. So
I think we're on your wavelength then. What we were thinking is some overall opinion about work plans, like, yay, they almost all got done, or they all got done, or then some, or, whatever the answers to that is. We don't know those answers, by the way, yet. And then coming up with some examples, a couple of goods, one not so good, or something in that neighborhood. So I think we're thinking along the same terms you are. The format of what you get is sort of what we might get stuck on, because are we, and we may have to have some more conversation about, do you want to just get stories written out in paragraph format, say, for examples? Do you want any pictures with any of this? Do you want a table that says these were done and these weren't? And that may come as you're starting to put things together too, which is okay. Just be thinking that we're not sure yet what format we're going to hand it to you in. And if you've got one you want to give us, great. And if not, we can talk about it. But so I think that's where we are, is we're not finished yet with the what got done, mainly because we don't have the what got done from them that did it.
Carolyn, same topic.
Carolyn, you had sorry.
I do have a comment, which we talked about with some of you. There's this attestation issue that we're really not clear on how to proceed for this first year, because we don't have that. And I know I was hoping that Megan Acevedo would help us out with coming up with a form or something for the agencies. I think what we came up with last time is we want 2 signatures from each member agency. But I think we need a little guidance. Wouldn't you agree, other committee members, on how to complete that portion of it?
And the way that my notes say we ended up at the end of the meeting was that we were going to have forgiveness for last year and work
Well,
on.
That's something that, I don't know if that's for us to decide.
Yeah, well, we were going to say, so here's us saying.
It's a proposal.
It's a proposal that we're thinking forgiveness for last year, because we didn't have a process in place to guide anyone for last year. And then could we decide on a process for next year, and can that be a form for them to sign off on? Did that? come out right? Does the rest of the group think that's right?
You know, I still don't see any harm in having a fairly generic statement, at least attesting the fact that they met the minimum requirement, which is to use the funds on a fire mitigation or prevention project that isn't replacement for an existing one.
Yeah.
And so is that something that you're still thinking whoever's going to represent, so like the president of the board and the executive officer of each agency would attest to that?
Yeah, I
If
mean,
you're-
for one, they already know that's a requirement. So for them to have done something else would kind of be going off the rails. But, you know, that is one of the things we have to check, you know, because it is one of the metrics in which we're supposed to be overseeing.
Right.
No, we agree
Okay,
with,
well,
Yeah, we can't
we
ignore.
just need a
not
form
asking.
that hopefully be, I'm sorry, we just need a form that would hopefully be able to be signed electronically that we can send out to the people that ran each of these projects.
This is something Mark
If
would be.
If it's going to take time to create a form, I would think that you can still have that discussion, but in the absence of a form, you know, we would still want some acknowledgement that, yes, they met that requirement and they're willing to put their name to it. You know, as
and
a,
by some acknowledgement, are you thinking like a letter covering all the projects to each entity and say, just you two guys sign here?
Well,
yeah, I mean, how'd you use the money? And
Right.
are these new projects?
Okay,
What-
so
isn't it proactive? Isn't it how we plan to use the money, even if the money might not have been spent yet? Is it?
And we can
Well,
build
the-
that part into the
Yeah.
current, into the process of building the 22-23 work plan.
Mhm.
but for 2020.
Right, that
which
would
is
be
what-
helpful.
Yeah, Pat, you've had your hand up.
I believe in the 2020 plan, at least in the written version that I've seen, there is, I don't know if it's a legal attestation, but there's a,
It isn't.
what? There's some wording there that says this is a new project. I probably have.
It's a declaration column in the,
Yeah,
a row, not a column. But it says this is, well, potentially it would say this is a new program. You know, couldn't be done without MPA funding.
right. And we don't actually know who attested to that, but at least someone did. It just, I don't know, it seems to me that this first time around is going to be not as vigorous as we will do so going forward, just because we have not known how this is going to play out. And this is really a learning experience of knowing, you know, we should have been working on this all this time. Of course, we've been busy writing bylaws and all of these other things. But I also feel like we're going to need maybe more than just waiting for our next regularly scheduled meeting to at least have the heads of these committees talk to each other, because I get the feeling, you know, I'm assuming so-and-so is doing something. I'm on 2 of these committees, but there are 4 of them all together. Is that right? And you're assuming somebody else is doing something, but don't know it for sure. And we're breaking Brown Act stuff if we start cross-talking. So perhaps we're going to need another additional meeting in order to get this out in a timely manner. Just a thought.
Yeah, and I know that other than some formational things, the group was not amenable to meeting more than once a month.
Yeah.
I'm not, I don't say, I'm willing to do as much as we need to. That's just me. But, you know, if you do feel like there are specific goals you'd like to meet in terms of time, you know, just kind of tell the committee what you need, and, you know, we can set it up, say in a workshop format or something like that.
Yeah, and I don't have any specifics in mind, and I don't know that it necessarily needs to be the whole group.
Mhm.
It would probably be more than 4. So,
Yeah.
so it gets into Brown Act questions that if maybe it could just be the 4 leaders of each group could get together. Maybe that's the way to go about it, because that would just be 4. And then you wouldn't have to have Brown Act considerations. But at least to have a feeling of what each group thinks they're doing and thinks the other groups are doing, so that we don't end up with some great gap here at the very end.
Mhm. Yeah, Lucy, you had your hand up.
No, I think you're right, Pat. I think we're going to have to be a little more on top of it, at least till for this year, because you know we don't want to let the situation just sort of occur too late. And we're already in some ways paying catch up because we were busy doing our own housekeeping for a long time. Which brings me back to something that Mark said, which I'm thinking out loud, which is that, Mark, you had said that our report this year should solely focus on the previous work plan. And I'm wondering whether, in fact, there could not be some section in there that says, looking ahead to the projects that have been approved but not yet completed, whether we would be able to make any comments or concerns or be able to discuss them in any fashion. I'm not sure that there's any legal requirement that we only focus on the previous year. I think it's pretty fluid as to what we might choose to discuss. Am I wrong?
I'd have to dig into a little bit more of the JPA, but I'm fairly certain the JPA, when it talks about the annual report, it is purely in a retrospective role for the report.
So it talks about adopting a report. Yeah, we should have another look at the language just to make sure about that. Yeah. Okay.
And we can talk, sorry, hand raised.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
And we can talk out loud about, well, so for example, the work plan group came up with a question around who's tracking the 10%. And the first question is for administrative funding of projects that are done at the local level or on DSpace programs. And number 1 question is, should we take that to the finance subcommittee? Do we bring it back to the whole group and discuss it? Probably bring it back to the whole group and discuss it. But things like that, or like the one we brought up earlier, that Lucy brought up earlier about the Master Gardener thing. We had a little question in our group as well about the Master Gardener thing. When stuff like that comes up, we bring it to the whole group and we talk about it, and that becomes part of the public record. Yes? Is that not true?
Yeah, I mean, if it's something you need to talk about, it has to come before the whole group.
Right. So for example, then at some point in the future, you're probably going to hear us bring up the stuff for the 21-22 work plan. The work plan group is looking at that as well as the 2020 that we're really reporting about. As we start to finish up on 2020, we'll probably start bringing up the issues we're finding in 21-22. Would have been great if that had come up before the 21-22 work plan got approved. don't know how that would have happened for this year. It probably wouldn't. There was no time. But for next year, for 22, 23, we could start doing now saying, aha, in such and such a month when the Advisory Technical Committee is working on the work plan, we ought to be in on that process somehow, so that we can start asking questions that, anyway, that's our thought. Maybe not,
Mhm. Yeah,
but I'm getting ahead of myself yet again.
Lucy, you still have your hand up, or?
Oh, yeah, no, so in order to just clarify my question, and obviously, Mark, you're gonna maybe talk to Megan about this, but the requirement
You
is
just go ahead without me. Sorry.
Okay, after review of the previous year's work plan and the financial audit, the Citizens Oversight Committee will adopt a report describing the extent to which the funds have been spent consistent with the tax measure, and that's clearly retroactive. And then the second part of the sentence reads, and provide feedback to the report of the directors, to the board of directors. And that is a slightly less clear category of communication. And my thinking was that if we did want to make any other sort of not strictly focused on last year's expenditure, but had some concerns under that category, that portion of the sentence, providing feedback, that would be how we could bring something into the report if we wanted to. But anyway, please let me know what you think and Megan thinks, and we can take it from there.
Will do.
Okay.
Okay, so there are a couple things that I heard that were, I'll characterize them as asked. Rebecca, one of the things you said was that you'd like to present the committee with some different formats for a report and want to get a general consensus as to what some of those ideas might be.
That was a much bigger thing than I said, Larry.
Yeah, I know that, but
Okay, you're
have
just saying
to,
that we're going to do that. Okay, fine.
yeah. Now, I because it's so big, I think probably the best way to do this is for you to come back with a, just a real simple, informal, well, it's already formal once it shows up in our agenda, but a list of things that you would like this committee to think about so that we can have that discussion at the next meeting. And because this is more visual, you might have to provide some examples, even if you take it from other reports that you've seen, whether they're public reports or just something where it helps to illustrate what you'd like to show to the committee.
So let me ask this. Yes, I brought it up about asking for the format. I was asking the format, or the, whatever you guys call yourself, report format committee. Would it not be appropriate for those guys to tell the rest of us?
Okay, so that's not your committee.
That's not my committee. That was my question.
That was your
But
question. All right.
work
It sounded
plan is
like
my
a statement, not a question originally, so I thought you were reporting out on behalf of that group.
Oh, sorry. I was reporting for work plans.
Okay, so Mark, how do we get these questions over to the work plan group through you? Can we do that through you? Yeah,
My turn to be muted.
yeah.
It would not be a meeting if not everybody gets an opportunity to do that. My wife is still trying to find that button in reality. But yeah, absolutely pass pass the questions through me and I'll get them off to the appropriate people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and the second big item we have, and I agree, it's needed. The question is timing. If we need better coordination between the 4 different groups, how often are those who are primarily involved willing to meet? Because that's always been our biggest impediment.
And are you thinking this is the whole COC meeting, or is this a person from each of the committees? So you end up with a 4-person plus you group.
Yeah, I mean, the basic answer to that is whatever it takes based on the topic. If it turns out it's just the 4 people who are the heads of the subcommittees, then we can do so without, public noticing it.
All right.
But if there is somebody who might add to that discussion that you need to have there, yeah, you'd still need to notice it. But it really, the question to address is how often are we willing to meet in order to get this done?
I
Yeah,
think we should
Lucy.
meet as often as we need to. Maybe have a set an every 2-week schedule or something, because this is our crunch period. We really need to get a lot of things sorted out.
Mhm. I would agree with you. I said from the beginning, we should meet as often as we need to until we don't,
Yeah.
But I know other people have time limitations or just don't want to put that level of commitment in. So, there's an opportunity to clear that up. Yes, Carolyn. You look like you're,
What if we made use of Google? I'm sorry, you can't hear me?
yeah, we can
No.
hear you.
Okay. What if we made use of Google Docs? That the report writing committee would create a template or an outline, and each subcommittee could fill in their portion, and that might streamline things, and we just meet, to wrap it up at the end. Is that acceptable under the Brown Act?
Good question, Mark. What do you think?
Yeah.
That is a really good question.
Yeah.
I will ask Megan on that.
Yeah.
So may I make?
I mean, I don't know if everybody's familiar with Google Docs, but that's the way it's supposed to work. And I think it would be helpful.
Can I make this suggestion? I believe the heads of the 4 committees are Kingston, Rebecca, Larry, and Lucy. Is that correct? Everybody shake your head.
We don't have an official head. I volunteered at some point.
Okay.
But if those 4 people are willing to meet every 2 weeks, then at least you've got the core, 1 person from each group. And if it needs to be a Brown Act, I'm willing to meet more often, but I don't have that clarity of a role.
That's not a bad idea.
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
Mark,
Okay.
yeah, I can set those meetings up. Mark, do you and or Ann need or want to be in parts of these discussions? Or should we just let you know what we're talking about and you can decide?
I think I don't think I have to be part of the conversation. If there could be topics where you want me to be there for clarification questions or what support we can provide in the creation of the document, but I'm more than happy to set the meetings up and either log in to open the meeting or give the login credentials to someone else to open the meeting. But I don't have to be at the meetings unless you guys want me at the meetings.
We're just coordinating things, Larry. I mean, we're just making sure we're all not working at cross purposes.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Yeah, but as Mark said, parts of our discussion could require some things that need clarification.
Yeah.
And I guess if we also create an agenda for ourselves, at least on the primary topics we want to address first, that will help to decide whether there are any technical or functional questions that we
Yeah.
want staff.
But you can take them up to Mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, after the meeting.
And if there's nothing rule breaking about it, I do have Zoom,
Mhm.
so I
Yeah,
could set up Zoom.
yeah, we're not recording it if it's not publicly noticed. So I'll shoot out a doodle poll and you can respond back with, a few dates and times. We'll figure, split the
Okay.
difference between this meeting and the next meeting. So, maybe in a couple weeks. What I'll go out with initially is to see if there are any specific things you want to talk about. Otherwise, I'll just give you some general questions for organizational purposes on, what we need to start talking about. Looks like Mark dropped off. He's still on, but he might have just stepped off camera. Okay, that's okay.
I clicked the wrong button. I meant to hit mute, but I turned off the camera.
That's okay.
Pull the mark. Yeah.
Probably let this discussion go way too long without seeing if there are any members of the public that are actually watching this. So my apologies for that. If there are members of the public out there who would like to ask questions or comment on any of our discussions, please feel free to raise your hand at this point.
I think Maria is the only public sitting out there.
Nobody cares.
Yeah, okay. You never know who will show up.
It's because we're doing such a good job. They're leaving us.
Yeah,
So
that's
riveting.
Don't say that, Kingston. Everyone's reading our minutes.
Okay. All right. Strike that. Oh,
okay. So sounds like we got a couple tasks to do. Is there anything else that anyone would like to bring up before we close out this agenda item?
Okay, a quick question, maybe not so quick. Who's writing herd on whom about the finance stuff that we're waiting for? Is there anything to be done about the audit, or we just have to wait till it's done?
Unfortunately, we're in a position to wait for it to be done. I've had meetings on the calendar with the finance committee to be able to present the audit, and
Didn't
I'll
help.
follow up with them again though. Didn't help.
So message to the universe, everybody put your mind on it.
Mark, the books are
I'll
closed.
inquire again.
Mark, the books are closed, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so at least gotten past that point.
Yeah.
Right, good. All right, so that closes all our reports at this time. Do any members of the committee wish to report on any informational items or make any comments just for the good of the order for this committee? Okay,
I'll just
Steve.
make a comment. Kingston,
Yes,
you can
go
go
ahead,
first.
Yes, Max.
Oh, I was just going to say that I serve on the Mill Valley Emergency Preparedness Commission, and we are looking to bring on 1 or 2 members in the coming months, as a couple of folks have had to step off as they're moving away. So if anyone knows good folks in Mill Valley who are interested in emergency preparedness or already involved, perhaps someone who's CERT trained or otherwise involved in the community, you can send them my way or send them to the city website in the coming weeks to take a look at the applications.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have anything they'd like to report on? Okay, seeing none. What would you like to discuss in next month's meeting besides things we just discussed in the previous topic?
Just winding up this report that we need to do. That's going to take up the meeting, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would expect so. All right, so nothing other than the things we just discussed.
Before you,
Yes,
that thing about who's looking at the 10% admin costs? Before the year goes too far, can we put that on the agenda? I don't know if it's for next time or the time after.
you're talking about the 10% for last year, correct?
Mm,
Last fiscal.
The process of 10, who's monitoring 10% going forward? Is that since the COC is monitoring everything, do we look at that? I mean, yes, we might at the end of the year, but
Well, there's
who's
that.
monitoring it as we go along? As projects are being worked on or done or finished, who looks at that?
Well, that should be something between the work plan and the finance committee, because there's an element of both. And you know, if we're going to look at things proactively, that's not the only metric that we're reporting out on. You know, eventually we would want to be in front of all the things that we report on.
Yeah. So maybe that's a bigger thing for further down after we finish this report.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, I don't know how we can address this before we catch up and get a little bit out in front of this, but if any of the financial statements are able, you know, that are published on a month-to-month basis are able to break out, you know, admin with, you know, as a proportion of the total cost, just have
It is for all the core projects, it is broken out.
Yeah, okay.
I have just a technical question relating to that, and it's a particular example. If the MWPA gives money to Fire Safe Marin, does the same 10% cap transfer to the Fire Safe Marin as a limit to Fire Safe Marin, or is that a different category? Just this is
Technically, yes, but the work that they're doing is the operational work of the public education, and so it's not the administration. Actually, Fire Safe Marin actually hasn't even been charging us for the administrative costs, such as invoicing and stuff like that.
okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it would be I think somebody should, or we should have some group that is doing it, and they should have a very clear understanding of how that works. Obviously, with grants and other things, every grant might have a different cap because that money isn't coming from Measure C, so they might have a different administrative limit. And so we should just really understand how it works. So if somebody can be an expert on that, that would be great. If somebody wants to step up and say, I can study this. Not me, I should add. Maybe anyway, this is something we'll, I guess, refine as we go along.
And I love doing the research part, but I'm not sure I'm the person about money.
Okay, Max, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just a future agenda item. Doesn't have to be the next agenda, but it'd be helpful for me and perhaps other COC members to learn a little bit more about the funds that the MWPA put in reserve this year. Larry, I know you are well steeped in municipal finance and agency finance, but I'm not. So I think kind of getting a finance 101 in terms of the reserve funds and whether those get invested and how and when we might use them in the future would be helpful for me.
I'll let Mark address this, but typically
Larry,
Yeah.
it's not an agenda item tonight.
Okay,
So we
Yeah.
really,
Time.
process wise, we really can't go down that rabbit hole.
so
Yeah.
what we can ask for is, you know, what the board, you know, as a starting point, what the board has, you know, set as their reserve policy. And I think by law, they're supposed to also have an investment policy.
Sounds good. And if others don't agree with the suggestion of the agenda item, I'm happy to talk to Mark offline. Thanks, Larry.
Okay,
Always like to know that kind of stuff.
okay, anything else for tonight? All right, would any members of the public like to make any suggestions about future agenda items? for
I'm
this-
looking. I apologize. I'm looking for any raised hands. And there's no public comment.
Thank you, Allison. Right, that leads us to the point of adjournment. If there are no objections, we will adjourn this meeting until the next time. And I'm saying next time because I can't remember what the date was. But it doesn't hit on Thanksgiving, correct, Mark?
No, it's a week early, right?
Yeah,
No, isn't it the day before?
we had a,
We moved it.
We moved.
Oh,
I still have to make that correction on the website though, or
I remember
within
now.
We
Granigan.
moved that in December.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, so this next time will be just as a matter of order, it'll be a special meeting with the cancellation of the regular meeting.
yep.
All right, well, thank you, good night, and
Thanks.
I'll be in touch with the other 3 committee heads shortly.
Okay,
Take care, everybody.
Thank
all
you.
right, thank
Good
you.
Good night, everybody.
All right.
bye.